Okay, welcome to...
welcome to Kevin's kitchen. I'll be making the traditional brown today.
All right, so little trick I learned from Colleen. Start with all the ingredients on one side of the table. As you add them, move them over here. That way, you know that it's in there. And you don't have a panicked Mary Rose moment where you realize there's no sugar in this bread and have to pull it out, which I've actually done once. So anyway, here we go. So let's start off with the flour. I just put it all into one measuring bowl or cup, whatever this is. So that's 3 cups of wheat flour. So I kind of deviate from the recipe here. And then I just do 1 cup on top or so of white. Good, so 4 cups. That. All right. There we go. And move the flour over here. It's in there. As the butter continues to come up to room temp, I'm going to measure out some of the other ingredients onto this plate so that they're ready to go. I can add some right away though. Sugar, 2 tablespoons of sugar. Big old tablespoon. All right. 2 of these. I measure it roughly. Uno. Dos. All right. The sugar is in there, but the sugar, of course, will wind up on the sugar crust here shortly. Oh, let's add salt to this now, which is 1 teaspoon of salt. All right, we'll add that right away. Move salt over. This is baking powder. Right, baking powder. I'm going to do 4 of these, but I'm not going to add them just yet. I'm going to put them onto this plate. There's 1, 4, okay. And I add those a little bit later. I don't know why, but I think on one of these recipes, that's how it said to do it, like right before you put the wet ingredients in, put the baking soda and baking powder in. All right, so here comes, now this is the baking soda. So there's 1.5 of those. Let's measure out half. All right. Yes, Grandma Mary Rose taught me how to make this bread one night and gave me the iron skillet that I'm going to use, which she used many times. So there's a lot of good mojo in that iron skillet. But I remember Grandma went crashing into the trash can. I think she was a little unsteady to begin with, but the pint of Guinness didn't help either. All right, so let's go ahead and start to work the butter into the flour. So I'm gonna go ahead and scoop that in there. All right. And for this, I use what I think is called a pastry cutter, which is what Grandma always used when she did this step too. You knew Grandma was going to make an Irish bread or brown bread if you came down and saw that there was sour cream on the countertop, butter, and eggs, of course, if it was going to be the Irish way, and this pastry cutter was usually ready to roll. Oh, and the buttermilk. All right, and I take my time with this step because I think it's really important to not have huge chunks of butter. What you're doing is sort of like, it's good to start off with it as room temperature because then it will more easily melt in, as it were, to the flour, which is what you want to do. You want to just kind of mix it in such a way that no butter is really visible. It's just kind of a part of the flour mixture. All right. So yes, Grandma Mary Rose stirred it off at room temperature with the wet ingredients. Probably a good solid reason behind that, but I don't know it. We're getting there good. So little bits, and you just sort of mash it up against the walls. So I'm going to add the soda and powder and mix that in as well. The soda and the powder is what gives it the rise that it needs. So I have a pint of buttermilk ready to roll. I have my sour cream, no eggs in the brown bread. All right, so let me go and add the buttermilk. Leave this aside because sometimes if the flour, there's still a lot of flour and it's too dry, I'm going to add a little bit of water or even some more buttermilk to this cup, this pint glass if I have to. All right, here comes the half a cup of sour cream. Good, and I'm just going to add this to it and begin to smash it up against the walls to kind of get it to melt into the buttermilk, as it were. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to go and preheat the oven to 330. So I usually make a little reservoir in the middle. Okay. Whoa. Lots of splashes. All right, we may need that in a little bit. All right, now let's start mixing it. Remember, you can always add more, you can't take it out, so.
So here with the dough, what you're really looking for is a consistency that is fairly dry. There's no liquid that you can see. It's a very dry dough.
So even in here, I try to compress it a little bit, begin to form it. In this, I just use the rest of that butter. I don't use it all though, so it's probably a little bit wasteful to do it this way, but. So, here comes the dough.
I always thought it was funny that this had such an uninspiring name, brown bread. Just very literal.
Okay. Good, now I'm just gonna work it down, being sure not to scrape the butter along. Just leave it where it is. Do a nice light sprinkle.